Hello, everybody, and welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World. Leading Entrepreneurs of the World features entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders presenting on cutting-edge topics and the latest in industry developments. Our goal is to provide the global business and entrepreneurial communities with a window into the minds of those who are shaping the future of the world. Today, we're very pleased to welcome leading entrepreneur, innovator, virtual and extended reality expert, Evan Sitler-Bates. Evan is the co-founder and co-CEO of XpertVR. XpertVR builds immersive virtual worlds for users to explore and learn by creating unforgettable e-learning experiences. At XpertVR, Evan and his team are working to change the way people experience education today and into the future. And so, as Evan says, one day soon, anyone, no matter their background or geographical location, will be able to pick up a headset and learn the skills needed to propel success in what they're passionate about. Evan, it is a great pleasure to have you here with us today to hear more about the future of education. Thank you and welcome to Leading Entrepreneurs of the World.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Stelios. I'll share my screen here and then I can jump in now. So really happy to be here to talk about the future of education and how we're helping propel it through virtual reality. So to jump into it here, there's a couple main takeaways that I want to make sure that everybody's getting from this presentation. So first of all, why is VR an important e-learning tool? When you should use VR, because you don't have to use it in every scenario, nor should you use it in every scenario. And three, how do you implement it at your institution, whether you're an academic institution or you're an enterprise organization that is implementing virtual reality. But before we get into that, a quick background on myself. As Stelios mentioned, my name is Evan Sitler-Bates. I'm the co-founder of XpertVR and CEO and co-CEO, and really have been a lifelong entrepreneur, trying all kinds of things growing up, and always excited to start businesses and work on creative ideas. And about 7 years ago, I went to Brock University and have since graduated, and through that started XpertVR, and now I'm a current DMZ Accelerator member, as well as the director of the Immersive Learning Research Canadian chapter. And a fun fact, if you're into virtual reality, there's a game kind of like Fortnite called Population 1, and just a month ago or so I won the Community Cup. So like to talk VR on the business and education side, but also like to play VR and be entertained by it. So who is XpertVR? Well, at XpertVR, we strive to enable meaningful interactions regardless of physical distance. Our mission is to help 1 million people learn from actions, not statements. And we've been doing this for 5 years now, working with all kinds of organizations. As you can see, a lot of academic organizations, but also working with research houses, brands, and a bunch of other enterprise organizations to really get this 1 million people into virtual reality and learning from actually doing, and not from just watching presentations and reading. So some of you may be new to virtual reality and augmented reality and all these acronyms. So I'll mostly be talking about virtual reality, but I like to quickly go through these acronyms so that we're all on the same page as we go through here. So there's kind of 4 main ones in the immersive technology space. So virtual reality, as you can see on the left there, is you're completely immersed in a virtual world. You put on the headset, and you can see behind me, if you're watching the Zoom, I'm in the same environment here, and you're completely immersed in that environment. Everywhere you look, all the sounds you hear, everything is completely virtual. Augmented is then almost the complete opposite of that, where you're putting on a pair of glasses or holding your phone in front of you, and a piece of that virtual world is displayed in the real world. So think Snapchat filters and things along those lines. Then mixed reality is kind of the next step up, or MR, from augmented reality. And basically what this means is you're layering that virtual world on the real world, but then adding some real world physics. So the example I like to give is you could put a virtual ball on a table and hit it with your real hand, and it would capture that you're hitting it with your hand and start rolling. And then when it gets to the end of the table, it would fall off the table and bounce on the ground. And then lastly, XR or extended reality. Lots of different ways to use XR, but I like to say extended reality. And basically, this is just a term to encompass all three of these and all immersive technologies under one. So if you're new to VR, you've probably at least tried something in the past or heard of somebody that has. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Three of the biggest ones that I normally hear are that there's poor quality and it causes motion sickness, headsets are large and clunky, and that it's really just for gamers and geeks and doesn't really have any real world applications. So all of these couldn't be farther from the truth. Headset's quality has gotten better and better. If all you've tried is something like that Google Cardboard, I think they're great. I have two of them on my desk here. They're great for certain applications, but headsets have continued to get better to the point where they have 8K resolution, and there's headsets out there today that you really can't even tell the difference between the real world and the virtual world. Obviously, that gets pretty expensive and you need to have a computer to hook up to it, but it has that quality and it's being built so you don't get motion sickness while going through it. As well, clunky headsets, definitely not true. There are headsets now where you don't need any computer or anything connected to it. There's no wires. It weighs on average a pound or less and has great straps so that you hardly feel it when it's on your head. And then lastly, VR is for gamers and geeks. Well, just last year, it was a $21.8 billion market size, and a huge portion of that was in the enterprise space and around healthcare and training and all kinds of other areas. That definitely isn't for gamers and geeks. And just to show a little bit more there, PwC put out a study not too long ago and showing that the growth of virtual reality in the global entertainment and media section, so on that entertainment side, is expected to grow more than any other industry over the next 5 years or 4 years now. So very interesting to see how the industry is growing both on the enterprise side and the entertainment side. But why is it important for e-learning? Why is it a great e-learning tool? So there's many benefits of VR, time and cost savings when you can send a headset to somebody to do training or even meet with a trainer virtually instead of flying that trainer somewhere to train a group. It saves so much time for that trainer as well as the trainee or the student that needs to wait for them to come, as well as obviously all the costs of sending them there and sending all the equipment there. Increased productivity, we'll get into it, but because of virtual reality, people remember and retain knowledge a lot longer than they do in regular traditional learning. There's been a study that PwC did that was showing that somebody in a virtual reality environment could remember up to 80% of what they learned a year after they learned it, compared to somebody in a traditional environment that remembered much less in just 2 weeks worth of time after they learned it. So because you're actually doing those actions, you're remembering what you're doing and going to that high retention rate on the right there. But knowing that, you can be more productive because you have more knowledge in the space that you're working in. It's safe and interactive because you're actually interacting with everything without being in the real world where you might make a mistake if you were, let's say, doing construction training and something could seriously injure you or injure somebody else. Being in that virtual environment, completely safe, but still able to interact with everything. Self-paced learning, obviously there's different ways to do virtual reality, whether you have a professor or teacher or trainer in there with the person going through the simulation or you time it. But there's a lot of great factors for having a practice mode or tutorial mode so that somebody can go in before they're being tested or whether they're being tested at all and self-pace, go through multiple scenarios so that they can learn where they're making mistakes and repeat those areas, which goes right into the next one of being repeatable and scalable. Once you build one simulation, now all of the employees at your organization or students at your institution can use that simulation again and again. It can have multiple scenarios so that an individual student that goes in isn't seeing the same thing every time they go in, and as well, everybody can do that again and again, which is scalable to everybody without increasing the cost of sending trainers to new locations. Which also saving that time of sending somebody or any equipment is great for the environment, as well as a couple other things that we'll show less on the training side, but just in the collaboration side. Shows that there's that environmental friendly because you don't need to send people to a boardroom or a conference room to meet up. And then lastly, the continuous improvement kind of goes back to that self-paced learning and higher retention rate and being able to do things again and again so that you can find the areas where you're struggling and make improvements there. And to build off of this, a few more facts from the PwC study, or one of the studies they put out over the past 2 years, is they found virtual reality learning was actually much better than traditional learning when it came to students' focus. They're 4 times more focused in a virtual reality environment because you're in a headset or you're glued to a computer, but usually in a headset, so there's no distractions around you. There's nothing, no sounds, there's nobody talking to you, there's nothing happening that might distract you in a traditional learning environment, so you're 4 times more focused there. And what this led to with the students coming out of this virtual environment compared to the traditional classroom learning environment was that they were 275% more confident to apply the skills they learned after training. And obviously this is important in every industry, whether you're a salesperson and going to do a sales pitch, or if you're in a training scenario where you're now going into a construction site and you could be doing something very dangerous. You want to make sure that the people coming out have learned the skills they need and are confident in applying them. And further down this road, there's 2 other big benefits that the PwC study found for virtual reality. One, that the average emotional connection felt by the learners in learning content was much higher. It was, I think, about 3.75 times higher is the calculation there. Of going through and being more emotionally connected. So when you're putting somebody through something where they are a police officer, let's say, that's dealing with somebody with mental health, or you're a counselor going through a simulation, being able to feel that emotional connection and that empathy as you go through the simulation is really important to training. More important so really than the individual skills or techniques that you're using. And then lastly, time to complete the training, much faster. As you can see here, it took 2 hours in a classroom environment, whereas less than half an hour in a virtual reality environment. So 4 times faster there and efficient to get people through the training. So what can VR do? There's kind of 4 levels to virtual reality, or I like to put it into 4 levels. One being pre-built off the shelf. This is something that if you were to ask me or ask Google, there's all kinds of solutions online that you can pay for, or sometimes even free, that you can download and start training today, all kinds of different skills. Then 2, there's virtual platforms, which again, you can go and for free most of the time, or if you're a business and need it for multiple people, a low fee usually, get a virtual platform that you can do meetings in, all kinds of other things in, and it's again basically just off the shelf, ready to go. Then there's 0 code editors. So this is, if you have somebody technical on your team, you can now use these editors to create your own simulations without having to have tons of experience in building these types of simulations. Then lastly, and if you really need something custom, there's custom simulations, which is working with a team like XpertVR. There's so many other companies that specialize in certain areas that you can work with to build what you really need for your simulation or your training. So to go into each of these, the first one, the pre-built simulation, here's a couple examples. Usually these range between free to $300 per student. And there's all kinds of great examples here, from keep talking and nobody explodes. Basically, this is a simulation where you're put in front of a bomb, and it's not very realistic, but you have to defuse this bomb with your teammates that have the instructions outside of the VR headset. So a great leadership and team building activity, and just started as a game, but we've been using it for those types of team building and fun entertainment, but skill building simulations. Then there's Organon, which is a great simulation if you're in the healthcare space to see all the different parts of a person's anatomy and study them in a healthcare sense. There's River, which is a great tool for firefighters and investigating arson or different things along those lines. And Body Swaps, and huge favorite of mine, is basically a simulation where you can sit down and talk to somebody in all kinds of different work-based or workplace scenarios. And going through those scenarios, you give your feedback and have the conversation, and then, like the name suggests, it body swaps you. So if I was giving a suggestion if let's say I was HR and somebody was coming in and I needed to discipline them for something and giving them suggestions or feedback, after I give that feedback, it swaps me into the place of the person getting the feedback. And you have to listen to that feedback yourself and kind of see, how did I give that feedback? Was it given in a good tone? And the AI inside of the body swaps then gives you suggestions and tells you what you should do differently next time. So a really interesting mix there of off-the-shelf solutions or pre-built simulations that are very cost-effective to get into virtual reality. Then secondly, the virtual reality classroom platforms. So these, I say classroom platforms, but can be used for so many other things. We use one that I didn't even list here because it's more of like a gaming one, but called Rec Room, where every Monday morning, or today, because yesterday was a holiday here in Canada, this morning, we get together in Rec Room. We have about a half an hour meeting where we have a whiteboard. Our whole team is sitting in the boardroom. We have discussions and we're able to chat and bring up new ideas for the week. And then the next half an hour, we can jump into a game and all have a team building activity. We usually play paintball, but there's all kinds of other things that you can do in that space. And this is great for those small meetings, but then there's also bigger platforms where you can get together and have 100 people or 1,000 people in the same environment and having a presentation and being able to interact, as you can kind of see in the picture here, as a 3D avatar or with a camera. So allows you to interact in real time. You can input text, audio, video files. Sometimes you can even put in 3D models, all kinds of functionality depending on what you're looking for. And in the e-learning sense, it's great for field trips where you can go back in time or go to Mars or places that you can't go in a regular field trip, or you just can't afford to go on a regular field trip. And the best part about most of these platforms, actually, yeah, all of the ones that I have listed here, they're also PC compatible. So yes, you can have a VR headset where you can jump in and you're your full avatar, but you can also have your PC or sometimes your phone where you just jump in and sometimes you're a 3D avatar, sometimes you're just a video camera on the wall. But having those options and that accessibility so not everybody has to have a VR headset and people can still get together and have that collaboration. And so again, really cost effective, $3 to $50 per person to get into these environments and start collaborating these ways. Then the third option that is great for a lot of solutions or for dipping your toes into virtual reality after trying those first few free or cheap models is zero code editors. So there's lots of these code editors. One of my favorite is by Serious Factory and called BTS, kind of similar to Body Swaps, except you design the simulation. And here again, a lot of these work for PC, tablet, or in VR. And the one BTS here, it allows you to build different conversations through branching dialogue. So basically, you enter the simulation and you have however many options that you set. So let's say you have hi, hello, and please go away. And then as the person training, you select an option. Depending on what option you select, it branches off, and then you have more options and continues and builds this kind of tree of dialogue that you go through. And there's all kinds of different types of these zero code editors that you can go through to build different scenarios, whether it be the ones I listed here around kind of around sales or around customer service, but also, like I mentioned, construction site safety. There's all kinds of different things that you can build inside of these simulations that are kind of drag and drop. So really easy for somebody to jump in and start using. And these cost between $100 to $3,000 per year, depending on all the functionality that you need. Then here, wait for this video to load. So here's one of the custom simulations that we've built in the past. So this is with Conestoga College, a college here in Ontario, Canada, that has a police training course. And so with this, they needed something completely custom that taught what their lesson plans were, that had logins for students, how to practice and a test and tutorials, all kinds of different modes. So working with them, we built this completely to their specifications, meeting with them kind of on a bi-weekly basis, and able to completely customize everything that a teacher needs to teach or a trainer needs to train their staff. So you can see here all the different functionality that's in there, and all of that is completely custom when you're working with a development company like ours. Um, and with that, whether it's a free roam scenario and you just want people to walk through, or you can design every second of the scenario so that it's kind of a timeline. And every time that you go through the simulation, you know exactly the order that people are going to see things and things that are going to happen. And most importantly here on the lots of the training is the data that's collected and sent to your learning management system or wherever you save data and share data with your employees. There's lots of ways to hook into those, whatever you're already using, so that you can continue to use the reporting software that you already use, but then have the virtual reality data in there. And so great for giving feedback and making improvements on your training, as well as the trainees improving their skills. So jumping into that a little bit more, there's all kinds of data that can be collected through VR. Basically, if you can think of it, it can be done in virtual reality or is being done. One of the most popular you can see here in the video is the eye tracking side of things. You can see heat maps being made, used a lot in consumer behavior, like you can see there with the convenience store, but all kinds of other options for training where you see, was the person watching the right dials in like a flight simulator? Were they looking in the right places in a construction site to make sure they were safe? All those types of questions, especially if somebody makes a mistake, you can take those couple steps back to see what was the first mistake that you made that might not be noticeable, but was based off of where you were looking. So all kinds of things that you can look at there. There's also other types of biofeedback, so you can track heart rate, galvanic skin response. So how is somebody sweating and how is their skin responding to a certain scenario? And using heart rate, eye tracking, galvanic skin response, and other biometric feedback, you can understand how is somebody feeling as they go through a simulation, whether that's kind of in this convenience store research sense where you're trying to understand, are they happy or excited to buy this product, or in a training sense like we're talking about, where they're going through and are you trying to understand, are they confident when they're in a high stress scenario? Are they nervous, scared? What are they feeling and where are they feeling that, so you can focus in on those areas and make improvements there. Beyond that, a couple other pieces of data that we like to track are in simulation surveys. So these can be pre and post. So when they start the survey when they start the simulation or end the simulation, but they can also be throughout the simulation. So saying they do a certain interaction, a survey could pop up. And obviously this is kind of being big in the research sense, but also in the training sense, if you don't really mind interrupting the training because you're trying to learn and maybe it's their first time going through, their second time going through, and you want to learn what they're doing so that you can make improvements, you could have a certain interaction that they do, whether that be using a forklift in the wrong, incorrect way. You could have a survey pop up, and then that survey, once they answer it, you can understand this is what were they thinking when they were doing that wrong action or that right action. As well, very important, path tracking. So being able to track what is the path and the way that somebody moves throughout a simulation, so you can look back and see, did they take the most optimal path through the environment? Did they miss something? And what were they thinking there as they went through the simulation while you're reviewing it with them? And a great tool and a great company that we've worked with on this is Cognitive 3D. So some of these tools are tools that we've built and we've integrated into our simulations, and lots of other companies have built. But then Cognitive 3D is basically bundled together all of these different data points, and they allow you to very easily add these into your simulation and are made for e-learning and for research, so you can understand the data that's coming out of your virtual reality simulations. So finishing up on the custom side, here's like a quick timeline and cost for VR development. Obviously, the first three were much cheaper and mostly off the shelf. Even the zero code editor, you just buy it and it's ready to go, and it really takes however long your editors, the people on your staff, take to use it. But looking at the custom side of things, there's kind of really the sky's the limit here on what's available and what you could do. But we like to say, and this is in Canadian dollars because we're in Canada here, but the $70,000 to $95,000 range is a good range to be looking at if you need a 3D environment, pretty simple, has obviously multiple 3D models in there, maybe some audio and text input or output. There's minimal data collection. They go through and they have like a couple interactions they have to do. In general, a simple simulation, but not too simple. It's something that they can do a full training simulation through. And this is going to take 1 to 4 months, more than leaning for the most time on that 4-month kind of range. And you can see here on the right, kind of a review of what we've gotten back on this, not to be salesy of us at all, but just so you can see kind of the feedback that we've gotten here. Then on the price range, going up a little higher, and again, this can go sky's the limit up to $1 million for simulations, but looking at some other features you might want to have in like having multiple environments, being able to do very complex interactions with 3D models, so like putting different 3D models together and then having to use that in some kind of scenario. Data collection and analysis, so using Cognitive 3D and in-depth data analysis there, having different VR accessories, so if you want the heart rate monitor, or you want to bring in a full body suit, so somebody's full body is tracked throughout a simulation, which I'll get into in a second, or even just avatars, having somebody there that they can interact with and has AI built into them, then you're looking at that higher price range and usually that 5 to 12 months range. So what's next? Let's say you're an organization and you've seen the presentation up to here, or you've heard this information already, and you're kind of on the same page. And where do you want to go next? Or what are the next steps that you should take? So what I like to say here is some questions to ask yourself. I know it might be kind of hard to see the graphic on the side here, but basically showing that one of the main things you have to do is get everybody on the same page, or that last point there, is your team aligned? Because one person may see picture number one of let's build this swing, and then all of the other people on the team see all these other different aspects of what they think building a swing or doing this project means. So first, you want to sit down and say, where will VR have the most impact? Especially if this is the first VR project you're doing. You don't want to just say, let's do it in my department, or let's just do it at X problem. You want to sit down and brainstorm and say, okay, we're spending X amount of budget on this simulation. What is going to be the return on investment? And let's compare a couple different projects that we could do to see where this investment will have the most impact. And then if it's really successful and does have that impact, you can start to look at the other problems to make sure that to start implementing and having that ROI on those other projects. As well on that, how many projects are you pursuing? Maybe you're convinced, or you've done one of those pilot projects or used one of those off-the-shelf solutions, and you want to try multiple projects at the same time. That can be great if they're all in the same type of space. So like, for example, we've been doing the police training side of things, and we did 4 different police training simulations at the same time. And because you're able to use a lot of tools from the same ones in a custom build, then it makes it a lot easier on the developers, whether they're in-house or whether they're a contracted development studio, it's much easier for them to bundle those together, and you can save money there if you're trying to build out multiple projects at the same time. And off of that, do we have the skills in-house? Maybe you have an IT department that has these development skills. Maybe it's something that you can hire people in. There's different options here. So look at what you have in-house and what you might need to contract out, or if you want to work with a studio or just work with somebody for consulting to make sure that you're aligning everything and doing everything properly with your in-house team. How realistic does a simulation need to be? This is a big thing that we see. Lots of people are like, I want the simulation to be as realistic as possible. But when you really think about it and thinking about going back to that first point, where will VR have the most impact? Does it really need to be as realistic as possible to have that impact? Or is this a simulation that you could turn down the realism a little bit, but all of the actions would still be the same, all of the learning outcomes would still be the same, but you're saving some time and some costs on making it that super realistic simulation. So there's a lot that you can play with there, and it's kind of like a dial that you can turn of how realistic you want that environment and everything in it to be. And then lastly, because we already touched on the last point there, what is our budget? So asking, what is the budget we have? There's kind of those 4 options that I went over, and there's a range in each of those options. Looking, what's the budget we have to do a pilot or to do our first full project, and seeing where it fits in there and making sure that the problem that you're trying to solve and the simulation that you're trying to build is going to fit within the timeline and budget that you have available. From here, so you have all of that figured out, you're kind of on the same page, but you want to sit down and make sure that that everybody that's going to be involved with the project or is working on the project is on that page. So once you've decided that as a business leader or as a group of business leaders or department heads or wherever you might be, you want to make sure that you're selecting an A team. This is kind of the team that we've seen come together at academic institutions and at enterprise organizations to make sure that everything is being done properly. So definitely IT department. There's going to need to be some support afterwards. So having a strong IT department and preferably at least one person that's really interested in VR and has tried VR before is very helpful. It's not mandatory because I know ourselves and many other VR companies, they offer support and maintenance afterwards, but having that in-house so that you have somebody you can go to if there's any issues with hardware or little problems you need to work out is definitely a huge benefit. Then having a pedagogy expert or somebody that's an expert in not just what you're teaching, because we have the industry experts there at 5, but how to teach it and how to really get those learning outcomes across to the students going through the simulation. 3, a funding decision maker. So whoever is setting that budget from the page before, making sure that they're involved and they're part of this team so that they're along at least every step of the way until you've signed and the project has started, so that they can understand where is this budget going towards and so that they're willing to fund it once you actually have everything planned. 4 comes in XpertVR or teams like ourselves, having that development team if you're building something custom or if you're using the zero code editor that is going to know how to use the tools that you have or use the tools that they have to build your vision and what you're looking to build for your trainees or students. Then again, going with that pedagogy expert, having those industry experts, so the people that are already training today that are going to be using this tool to train new students, because we see what we're building in virtual reality not as a replacement of training, but as an upgraded textbook or PowerPoint slide, where now that teacher can still teach maybe using that textbook or that PowerPoint slide, but then once they've taught, the students can jump in and practice, and those students are going to continue to have questions about what they learned or need recaps, and some of that can be in virtual reality, but the industry experts are still going to still need to be there to answer those questions. So having those industry experts to help there is very important, and make sure that what you're building follows what the industry needs. And then not mandatory, but always good to have along, at least once you get to the end and you're doing like a pilot or QA test, having students or having trainees along for this journey and part of this A team to sit down and discuss and make sure that they're understanding how to use this simulation and that it's actually built for them and not just built as another tool. All right, so now getting into the last part of the presentation, just to talk about hardware. So there's kind of three types of hardware, but we'll only really touch on two. You can see here the predictions for how hardware are going to grow over the next 4 or 5 years. Basically, there's standalone VR headsets, so headsets that don't need any computer. There's home VR units that are plugged into a computer, and then there's mobile VR units, which are ones that you put your mobile phone into. So you can see that the mobile phone is steadily kind of decreasing at the bottom. The home VR units is increasing, but incrementally, and standalone VR units is predicted to really take off. So getting into those standalone VR, again, no computer, no extra cameras or any really extra accessories that you have to set up outside of the headset. So as you can see in that picture, that's the Vive Focus 3, and you have the headset and you have the controllers and you're ready to go. You go plug that into your computer or go into the App Store and download whatever software you want, and then you unplug it, or don't even need to if you're just in the App Store, and you're ready to go. You're ready to start learning with that hardware. It's really lightweight, it's easily portable, so you can set up in all kinds of different locations. You can mail it to people. The only issue is it has a limited power, so it's basically like a cell phone processor in there, but it's built for the headset, so it's much more powerful than a cell phone. It can run a lot of simulations that a computer can run, and there's just like a lot of optimizing that you have to do when developing for it. And of course, it's really great on the price range, depending on what you're going for. On the low end, Oculus, a great headset, but obviously you're dealing with Facebook there because Facebook owns Oculus. It's on that $400, or actually I think it's $300 now USD, up to $1,300 for the Vive Focus. So great range there on the standalone side. Then you have the home or the tethered VR. So these ones you can see there's a cable attached to it. It has to plug into a computer. This though means that it's very, very realistic. You can create simulations that are very intricate, that look as realistic as real life. You can have all kinds of extra data collection. Not saying you can't do that with the standalone headsets, but it's a lot easier and there's a lot more available for the tethered ones. The downside though is you're plugged into a computer, you have a wire. There's lots of ways you can hang that from the ceiling and get out of the way of people using a wired headset, but it's not the best option if you want full freedom or need to ship a headset to somebody. With this, it's approximately 3,000 USD for the HTC or the Oculus Rift, and I say that it's actually around the $1,000 range, but then you need a computer to run with it. So if you already have a computer, you can save that money, but it can go up to that $3,000 range to have a computer that runs with it. Then for the Vario, you have the 5495. So that's actually, and I forgot to add this here, that's actually just for the headset. So that's kind of the highest, or not kind of, it is the highest end headset that's available on the market, the Vario. And it is the one that allows you to have that human eye quality. And the interesting part of this is you can see on the Vario there, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's the bottom headset there. It has these big cameras on the front. And unlike the Vive, which has cameras on there for some tracking, these ones allow you actually to have video pass through. So augmented reality, like we talked about before, or mixed reality, MR, allows you to see through the headset, just like if you were using your real eyes and not a screen. But then you can place 3D models and they look as realistic as real life, and you can really not even tell the difference because their software is tracking where light's coming from in the room and makes reflections off of the 3D models that you place in your physical space. Then we have VR accessories. So basically these can work with all of these headsets in some factor, but work best with the home or tethered VR headsets. And there's kind of 4 different areas that I like to talk about in the VR accessories. There's VR gloves. So these are create immersive hands-on experiences where you don't need to use controllers that aren't as natural. You just have gloves that allow you to interact like you would in the real world, and as well capture hand data to see what you were doing. And this is very intuitive. Some headsets you don't even need the gloves; it's just hand tracking. With the gloves, allow for the best tracking possible instead of just using cameras to track your hands. Then there's VR suits. So these are full body, lots of them. Some of them are just vests, but lots of them full body suits. Tesla suit is one of the biggest, not at all related to Elon Musk and Tesla there. Completely different, but Tesla suits. And this allows you to track your full body throughout the simulation, have haptics, so you can feel rain, you can feel a gunshot, you can feel all of these different things as you're in the virtual world. So very effective for causing memory retention and remembering what you were training on, as well as you can capture the motion, so you can replay what somebody did as they went through a simulation, and you can see where they made a mistake or use that motion for all kinds of other use cases, as well as the biometric feedback, so you understand how they were feeling as they went through the simulation. Then there's EEG and GSR. Haven't really mentioned this, or I mentioned the GSR, but not the EEG. You can see there it's a apparatus that goes around your whole head. There's other ones that are kind of just on the forehead. There's different ones out there, and it's still a really early stage. But this allows the headset or the software to read your brain waves. And there's actually some really interesting demos out there of how this can be used to collect data, but also to use mind control in a virtual reality simulations, or so that you can control the virtual world with your mind without having to use controllers in any way. So really interesting applications there, kind of in the more long-term looking phase where you might want to actually use it in training, but it's something to look at depending on what you need or what data you want to collect as somebody goes through the simulation. And then on the bottom there, environmental factors. So these are all kind of in that experimental phase as well, but there are different accessories for smell, taste, and temperature. The VR suits, for example, can cause different heat and cold and temperatures. There's devices that clip on that you put in different smell packs, and then they mix together and produce different smells as you go throughout the simulation. And there's even taste simulators that use electrodes, so that when you drink from a glass of water and your lips and your tongue touch the electrode, it simulates a couple different mixtures of senses that make you think that you're drinking something else or you're tasting something else. So really interesting, again, pretty early on, but interesting nonetheless, of how it might be able to use to enhance a training or e-learning environment. I think this is one of the last slides here. So to go over the different approaches to VR, there's kind of three different ways that you'll want to look at how you use this hardware. So one, there's VR labs. So you can set this up at your office, have a lab where your IT staff can go, where the trainees can come in and everything's set up. And this is preferable for these more expensive and expensive setups that use computers and need a lot of setup. Having it permanently set up there is a lot easier for getting more trainees through, and can be a great solution. Then there's the remote VR. So if you're mailing it to someone, it's great to have one of these Pelican cases, or to have a case to mail out to somebody and have really everything you need in one place, which usually is just the headset, controllers, and a charging cable. So great to have that all in one place. You can just mail it to somebody and they can experience remotely. And then kind of a mixture of the two, which we've seen work well at academic institutions or large organizations, are mobile VR carts. So you can have a cart that has a TV set up on it, has the computer, has everything already plugged in, and then wherever you need to go, you wheel it there, set it up in the room that you're using, and everybody can see what the person in VR is seeing on the screen, and everything's kind of ready to go in one place. Can be great. You want to make sure you have a really sturdy cart though for moving all of that equipment around. Oh yes, and with all this said, obviously COVID-19 has been huge over the past a year and a half, almost 2 years now, and cleanliness never really goes out of style. So making sure that you have a process in place to keep headsets clean. Remember, this is somebody's putting it onto their headset and they're interacting, sometimes doing a lot of interactions that can make them sweat or just not great in general. So having something set up, whether that's just these rubber covers that you can get to make sure that there's no like sweat getting into the foam and it's easy to Lysol wipe and wipe off, or on the higher end, if you're putting a lot of people through a simulation again and again, or just want to make sure the headsets and controllers are as clean and safe as possible. There's this product called a clean box, and they come in these one by one squares, or you can get bigger and bigger ones to have more headsets at a time. But you put it in there, and in under a minute, it blasts UV rays and completely disinfects headsets. And it's been FDA approved for fighting COVID-19, as well as all kinds of bacterias and making sure they're removed from the headsets. So having kind of this loop here where you put the headset in the clean box, you give the head or wipe it down in some way, and then you give it to the students or trainees, they give it back and again and again. So with all of that said, again, my name is Evan Sitler. Our website's expertvr.ca, Evan at expertvr.com, or 519-741-7778. Always happy to connect on LinkedIn and answer any questions you have about immersive technologies or anything else that I kind of talked about or that you're interested in and think I might be able to help answer, as well as we have a lot of great resources on our website.